At family dinner, my mother announced that I would not inherit. I just nodded silently, until my nephew looked at his phone with his mouth open and whispered, "No way." The whole family fell silent when they saw the screen. My name is Mariah Miller, and at 35 years old, I built a fintech empire that almost no one in my life knew about. I was driving back to my childhood home in Gulf Shores, Alabama for Thanksgiving dinner, the first in 7 years, with a knot twisting in my stomach. My mother always favored my brothers, grooming them to take over the family business, but nothing could have prepared me for her blunt announcement at the table. When she declared I'd be cut from the inheritance, leaving everything to them for their dedication, I didn't argue or react. I simply nodded and kept eating my turkey fork steady in my hand. Little did they know that calm response was just the setup for a revelation that would shatter the evening and expose years of overlooked potential. A single phone notification was about to turn their dismissal into shock and force them to confront what they'd ignored for so long. If you're watching this right now, smash that like button, subscribe for more real-life family twists, and drop in the comments where you're tuning in from as I walk you through a holiday dinner that exposed hidden truths and changed everything forever. I grew up in Gulf Shores, a small coastal town in Alabama, where everyone knew everyone's business. Our family home was a spacious beach house overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, the kind that made neighbors whisper about our success. We had it to some degree. My father, David, had built a thriving chain of seafood restaurants from scratch, starting with one shack on the pier and expanding to several locations along the coast. He never let anyone forget his hard work, and the house always carried the faint smell of fresh catch from his latest deliveries. From my earliest memories, it was obvious who held the spotlight in our household. My brothers Jeffrey and Mark were primed to inherit and run the family restaurants almost from birth. Jeffrey, 3 years older than me, had a sharp mind for finances, crunching numbers like a pro, even as a kid. Mark, 2 years younger, charmed everyone with his people skills, perfect for handling customers and suppliers. Me, I was the middle child who never quite aligned with my mother's vision of what a daughter should be. The restaurant world is tough, Mariah, Mom would say whenever I expressed interest in the operations. You should focus on finding a reliable husband who can support you. This was the early 2000s, not some bygone era, but my mother Anna clung to outdated ideas about gender roles. My father gave me knowing glances sometimes, but he never challenged her. He came from a generation where husbands led and wives followed without question. School became my escape. I thrived in math and computer science classes, staying late to tinker in the lab. While my brothers tagged along to supplier meetings and tastings at the restaurants, I buried myself in equations and early software programs. The beachside business dinners, those lively gatherings on the deck with grilled shrimp and strategy talks, excluded me every time. I'd watch from my room window, hearing laughter float up, feeling that sharp sting of isolation. It wasn't just missing out, it was the constant reminder that my ideas didn't count because I wasn't one of the boys. One teacher saw something in me. Ms. Taylor, my high school mentor, introduced me to coding during junior year. "You've got a real talent, Mariah," she said after I debugged a tricky program faster than anyone else. "The world's shifting to technology, it's the future, and you could shape it." Her words ignited a spark, cutting through the loneliness like a lifeline. For the first time, I envisioned a path beyond the family's expectations, one where my skills mattered. Inside, I felt a mix of genuine joy for my brothers' successes. They earned their spots in their own ways, and a deep ache from being sidelined. It built a quiet resolve but also left scars that lingered. Ever felt invisible in your own family? But that favoritism hit harder when college time came. Have you ever been told your dreams don't matter? When application season rolled around, I set my sights on MIT. Their computer science program ranked among the best, and the Innovation Hub in Boston promised real opportunities beyond our coastal town. I poured everything into my submission essays about coding solutions for inventory tracking that could help small businesses like ours, recommendations from Ms. Taylor, and test scores that reflected late nights studying under my desk lamp. The acceptance letter arrived one humid afternoon, sealed in a thick envelope that felt like validation in my hands. Ecstatic, I rushed to show it off, imagining it as my ticket out. But my mother's reaction crushed that high. MIT in Massachusetts. That's absurd. She scoffed, barely glancing at the paper. The family restaurants are here in Alabama. Besides, do you have any idea how much that costs? I knew exactly. I'd researched scholarships and aid packages meticulously, but a gap remained, one that required family support. We stood in her home office, surrounded by stacks of restaurant invoices and the distant hum of waves. She sat behind her desk like a gatekeeper, her expression unyielding. "Your brothers need those funds for their business degrees," she explained coolly. "They're the ones who will keep this chain running. Your tech hobby won't pay the bills." It wasn't a hobby, it was my passion, the future I saw clearly. But her words landed like a slap, fueling a frustration that burned hot in my chest. I pushed back, voice steady despite the tremble inside. "This is my life, Mom. Tech is changing everything." She turned back to her ledger, dismissing me with a wave. "Figure it out yourself then." The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the rejection. Determined not to let her words define me, I deferred my admission for a year. That meant grinding through 3 jobs at once to bridge the financial chasm. Mornings, I waitressed at a local seafood joint, not hours, to avoid the irony, serving plates of fried shrimp to tourists while my feet ached. Afternoons shifted to retail at a beachwear shop, folding towels and ringing up sales under fluorescent lights. Evenings, I handled bookkeeping for small businesses downtown, entering numbers until my eyes blurred. Every paycheck went straight to savings minus bare essentials, building a resilience forged in exhaustion. Some nights, frustration boiled over into quiet tears, but determination pushed me forward like fuel from the fire of being undervalued. Finally, the following fall, I stepped onto MIT's campus, loans secured and scholarships pieced together. Those college years tested every limit. While classmates enjoyed dorm parties and study groups, I juggled classes with part-time gigs, surviving on 4 hours of sleep during finals. The workload was relentless: coding marathons, group projects on algorithms, but each challenge sharpened my edge, turning doubt into drive. Graduation came with honors, a degree clutched like a hard-won trophy, but the emotional toll lingered, a mix of triumph and lingering resentment from that initial denial. How far would you go for your dreams when family says no? I got to MIT, but the real battles were just starting. Stick around to see how it broke me. After graduation, my first role was at a scrappy fintech startup in New York City. The pay barely covered rent in a shoebox apartment, but the hands-on experience proved priceless. I worked side by side with the founders, diving into everything from product development to pitch decks for investors. We built tools that streamlined banking transactions, using early AI to spot patterns in data that humans might overlook. Those days blurred into nights filled with caffeine-fueled coding sessions and the thrill of turning ideas into functional prototypes. It was chaotic, deadlines loomed like storm clouds, but absorbing their grit taught me how to navigate the cutthroat world of startups. 2 years in, the company got acquired by a bigger player, giving me a modest payout and the confidence to strike out on my own. With those savings and the connections I'd forged, I launched my venture, a fintech platform leveraging AI to detect fraud in real time and personalize financial advice for users. We started small, pre-revenue, and fueled by venture capital scraps. The early months were brutal, pivoting features based on user feedback, fixing bugs that crashed demos, and staring down near bankruptcy twice when funding rounds fell through. Sleepless nights became routine, my mind racing with what-ifs as I poured every ounce of energy into the code. Emotionally, it drained me, amplifying the bitterness from home, where my ambitions had been brushed off as frivolous. Yet each setback hardened my resolve, pushing me to refine the algorithm until it outperformed competitors in tests. Meanwhile, back in Gulf Shores, Jeffrey and Mark had stepped into executive roles at the family seafood chain. Every sporadic call from Mom included glowing updates, Jeffrey streamlining costs to boost profits, Mark schmoozing with suppliers for better deals on fresh Gulf shrimp. I was genuinely pleased for them. They'd found their groove in the business our father built. But the contrast stung, highlighting how my path was never valued the same way. Dad occasionally asked vague questions about my work, but Mom steered conversations back to the restaurant's triumphs. The breaking point came during a brief visit home about 7 years ago. I'd just secured our first major funding round for the platform, working around the clock to prove its potential in fraud detection for banks. At a family dinner on the deck, waves lapping below, Mom asked about my little finance project in that dismissive tone. I tried explaining the milestone closing Series A meant real traction, but she interrupted. Sounds risky. Real businesses serve customers face-to-face like our restaurants. Jeffrey chuckled, adding, When are you getting a stable job, sis? Then Jeffrey's wife, Brianna, chimed in sarcastically. Must be nice playing with apps while the boys handle the heavy lifting here. Her words escalated the tension, turning the meal into a heated exchange, where I defended my vision only to be met with eye rolls and redirection to the chain's latest expansion. The argument amplified my hurt, a raw bitterness bubbling up from years of being sidelined. I left the next morning without fanfare, vowing to keep my growing successes private. For the following years, contact dwindled to occasional calls with Mom and generic holiday cards. They knew I was in New York tinkering with finance tech, but details stayed buried. I never volunteered my wins, and they rarely probed deeper. Ever kept success secret from family who doubted you? That last visit sealed my silence for 7 years, but what happened when I returned? You won't believe the drama. 7 years later, I pulled up to the familiar beach house in my rented compact car. My custom luxury sedan stayed parked in my New York garage, no need to flaunt anything that might raise eyebrows. I deliberately toned down my look, a plain sweater and jeans instead of my usual tailored outfits, my expensive watch tucked away under a sleeve. The only indulgence I couldn't ditch was the quiet satisfaction of my achievements, but even that stayed hidden. As I stepped out, a wave of internal anxiety surged, twisting like the Gulf currents I'd known as a kid. The house looked festive for Thanksgiving, adorned with beach-themed lights strung along the eaves and a wreath of seashells on the front door. Through the windows, the glow of the dining room hinted at the gathering inside. For a moment, I hesitated on the porch, the salty breeze carrying echoes of past tensions. Would they notice how I'd changed, or would I still feel like the outsider? I rang the bell, steadying my breath. My mother answered, her face brightening as she pulled me into a hug. The scent of her perfume mixed with the aroma of roasting turkey and fresh herbs, stirring a flood of memories. Mariah, you're here, she said warmly, though I caught an undercurrent of concern in her eyes. Come in, everyone's waiting. She ushered me into the living room where familiar faces turned my way. My older brother Jeffrey stood by the fireplace with a drink in hand, his wife Brianna arranging side dishes on a nearby table. Their kids, Bobby, now 14, and Amber, 12, were glued to their devices on the couch. My younger brother Mark chatted with his wife Caitlin while their 16-year-old son Billy scrolled on his phone in the corner. Aunt Christina, Mom's sister, conversed with her husband Uncle Anthony near the window overlooking the Gulf. Uncle Joseph, Dad's brother, watched a football game with his wife Aunt Alyssa. And there, in his favorite armchair with a view of the waves, sat my father, David. He looked grayer than I remembered, his posture still solid, but his eyes appraised me coolly. Mariah, he acknowledged with a nod, not rising. No embrace, just the statement. Hi, Dad. Happy Thanksgiving, I replied evenly. Jeffrey approached with an awkward side hug. Sis, long time. New York's treating you okay? It is, I said vaguely. Mark joined his smile, polite but distant. Still messing with those finance apps. Something like that, I answered, keeping it light. Then they launched into updates. The seafood chain's exploding, Jeffrey boasted. We added 2 new spots along the coast last quarter, revenue up 40%. Mark nodded. I'm overseeing client relations now, locking in deals with bigger suppliers. Their subtle bragging hit like salt in old wounds, rekindling that familiar ache of being undervalued. I smiled and congratulated them, steering clear of my own world. Brianna eyed me skeptically as she set out plates. So Mariah, what's new with your project? Still chasing investors? Her tone dripped doubt, building the tension I'd anticipated. I minimized it diplomatically. We're making steady progress. The room hummed with small talk, sports scores, kids' school activities, local gossip about beach erosion, carefully avoiding anything deep. I focused on the nieces and nephews. Amber perked up when I asked about her science class. We're doing experiments with circuits, it's cool, she said shyly, sparking a brief warmth amid the unease. Bobby talked basketball tryouts while Billy barely looked up from his screen. Dinner commenced in the formal dining room reserved for holidays, with the good china crystal glasses and a spread of turkey stuffing and fresh Gulf seafood. Dad led a quick prayer thanking for family and another strong year at the restaurants. No mention of my return. As plates filled the underlying strain, simmered conversations skirting edges like waves teasing the shore. Has your family reunion ever felt this tense? As the meal progressed, my father cleared his throat and tapped his glass with a spoon, signaling an announcement. The room quieted, Forks pausing mid-bite. He wore his usual holiday button-down stained faintly from years of kitchen oversight, his tone carrying that familiar authority. Before dessert, I have something important. He began, glancing at Mom for a nod. She took over seamlessly, her voice firm. The seafood chain's been thriving thanks to Jeffrey and Mark's hard work. My brothers straightened, soaking in the praise. Jeffrey's wife Brianna beamed smugly while Mark's wife Caitlin nodded supportively. We've secured prime Gulf front locations and seen record tourism boosts. Mom continued, her words laced with pride. Murmurs of approval rippled around the table. Uncle Anthony raising his glass, Aunt Christina patting Jeffrey's arm. Dad interjected briefly about growth metrics, but Mom steered back. With this success, we've planned succession carefully. She paused, eyes locking on mine for the first time that evening. Jeffrey will step up as CEO next year, his financial savvy perfect for steering us forward. Jeffrey accepted with a humble nod. Mark will handle president duties, excelling in client ties and expansions. Mark smiled appreciatively. The table erupted in congratulations, claps on backs, toasts clinking. Aunt Alyssa squeezed Mark's hand while Uncle Joseph joked about free shrimp forever. Mom's gaze returned to me, her expression shifting to matter-of-fact resolve. As for the inheritance, she stated evenly, we've revised the will to reflect true contributions. Tension thickened instantly. Jeffrey and Mark will split the business and main assets, they've poured their lives into it. Then directly at me, Mariah, you won't receive anything. You've chosen a different road away from this family and its legacy. The words landed like a crashing wave, but I'd braced for it. The room fell, pin-drop, silent eyes darting between us, waiting for fallout. I met her stare steadily, picking up my fork for another bite of stuffing. The flavors registered dimly as I maintained composure. 7 years ago, this might have unleashed tears or fury, but now it felt like confirmation of old patterns. Mom continued unapologetically, they deserve it for building on what we started. Brianna broke the hush first, her tone disapproving. Anna, really? At Thanksgiving? But Mom shrugged it off. Family matters discussed with family present. Chatter resumed, awkwardly subdued now, with pitying glances my way. I focused on my plate, memories surging, the denied college aid, the belittled ambitions, the subtle signals that daughters ranked lower. Amber whispered beside me, her young face concerned. Are you okay, Aunt Mariah? I smiled genuinely. I'm fine, sweetie. Grown-ups complicate things sometimes. She nodded wisely. Grandma's pretty old school. The truth from a child eased the moment slightly. Conversations shifted to safer topics, holiday plans, weather forecasts, but the air hung heavy. Then Billy, who'd snuck glances at his phone throughout, suddenly gasped sharply. All heads snapped his way. Imagine the table going silent. Pause for dramatic effect. Silverware clattering as he stared wide-eyed at the screen. Aunt Mariah, you're on the Forbes list, he stammered, voice cracking. Like billionaire level. Disbelief swept the room, Jeffrey frowning, Brianna scoffing. Must be a mix-up, Mark said dismissively, but Billy shook his head, turning the device. No, it's her photo and all, worth $2.8 billion from some fintech giant buyout. Dad demanded the phone, his face paling as he scrolled. This says you founded FraudShield AI, acquired last month. Eyes locked on me, the shock electric. I drew a breath, the revelation crashing in sooner than planned. What would you do if your family exploded like this? The room exploded in chaos as the reality sank in. Questions flew from all sides, voices overlapping in a cacophony that drowned out the distant Gulf waves. 3.2 billion, how? Jeffrey demanded, his face flushing red as he grabbed the phone from Dad. Mom's hands trembled slightly on her napkin, her expression a mix of confusion and wounded pride. You kept this from us all this time? She asked, voice small but edged with accusation. Brianna leaned forward, eyes narrowing. So, while we thought you were scraping by with some app side gig, you were raking in billions. Her tone dripped with resentment, amplifying the betrayal hanging thick in the air. Mark looked sheepish, shifting uncomfortably, while Caitlin placed a hand on his arm, silent but wide-eyed. The kids, Amber, Bobby, and Billy, stared in awe, Billy grinning like he'd uncovered buried treasure. I raised a hand for quiet, surprised when the table actually hushed. Perhaps success commanded attention even here. Taking a steady breath, I explained calmly. I founded FraudShield AI 7 years ago. Our platform uses artificial intelligence to detect banking fraud in real time and offer personalized financial plans based on user data patterns. We analyze billions of transactions, spotting anomalies that traditional systems miss. The words flowed matter-of-factly, but inside a storm raged, years of dismissal boiling to the surface. Last month, a major tech firm acquired us for cash and stock. Dad repeated the number dazedly, 2.8 billion. Uncle Anthony whistled low while Aunt Christina murmured, "That's incredible." But Mom's face hardened. Why hide it? We're family. Her hurt stung, but I met her gaze directly. Would it have changed anything? You made it clear only the seafood chain counted as real success, the kind Jeffrey and Mark achieved by staying put. Jeffrey's demeanor shifted gears, ever the opportunist. We could collaborate. Our chain's supply tracking might integrate with your AI-optimized costs. His eagerness felt self-serving, ignoring the deeper rift. Brianna nodded vigorously. Exactly. Family helps family. But Aunt Alyssa interjected perceptively. Maybe Mariah needed space after how she's been treated. The uncomfortable truth lingered, fueling my resolve. Gregory, wait, no, Mark admitted grudgingly. That's impressive tech. We've been using basic apps for orders, but nothing like this. Billy, still buzzing, explained his discovery. I was researching AI for a school project on finance security. When the acquisition hit news sites this morning, Aunt Mariah's name popped up everywhere, then Forbes updated. The dynamic cracked open old wounds wide. Mom's confusion morphed into defensiveness during a private sidebar in the kitchen, away from prying ears. I did what was best, she insisted, arms crossed. The chain needed strong hands, your brother stepped up. Brianna hovered nearby, accusing, this feels like a stunt, showing up humble, then dropping this bomb. Rubbing it in. Her words ignited the pent-up anger I'd buried for years, my voice breaking as I countered. A stunt. You all dismissed me repeatedly. Hobby, not real work. I built this alone because you never believed in me. The exchange escalated, voices rising, emotional release, flooding out in waves of bitterness and raw frustration. Dad peeked in, but stayed silent, his regret palpable, yet unspoken. Jeffrey joined, pitching partnerships again, but I shut it down. This isn't about business, it's about respect you never gave. Overwhelmed, I excused myself early, citing a work emergency. My COO's call buzzed in integration glitches at a partner bank needing my sign-off. Handle the rollback. I directed via video, the familiar crisis grounding me amid the family turmoil. Driving away, waves crashing in the rear view, cut to waves crashing as I drive away, pause. I cut ties decisively. No more. Calls, emails blocked. The liberation washed over me, bittersweet, but freeing, shedding the weight of seeking approval that never came. Months later, ripples hit hard. The seafood chain struggled as online ordering apps surged, services like those powered by tech, similar to mine, siphoned customers with seamless delivery. Revenue dipped 30% in Gulf Shores, spots hit by digital competition that small businesses like theirs couldn't match without upgrades. Jeffrey and Mark pitched collaboration desperately via a mutual contact, but I declined flatly, no favors for those who'd undervalued me. Their regret surfaced in vague messages I ignored, stubborn pride, preventing real change. The family fractured, further gatherings tense without me, a void from lost connections. Success stems from self-validation, not chasing nods from biased kin. Family favoritism breeds isolation, squandering bonds that could thrive on equity. Share your story of breaking free in comments. Did cutting ties empower you?